Leadership is not about being the loudest voice in the room. It's about alignment, awareness, heart, and grit. I'm Tammy Ebright, leadership strategist, and this is Unleash Your Amazing Leadership. Join me as I chat with leaders who are evolving, growing, and creating real impact on purpose. Each week, you'll hear stories that inspire, challenge, and remind you of who you are. Let's dive in. Welcome back to Unleash Your Amazing Leadership. Today, my special guest is Jamie Wehmeyer. Jamie has spent 25 years in behavioral health. She's a very strong advocate for trauma-informed care inside leadership and teams. She has experienced an unbelievable loss in her life, and I am really grateful to have known her. And we met, shortly after her son, Jake, was murdered. And that was 2017?
Correct. Yep.
So welcome, Jamie.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Well, let's just dive on in. Let's start with what brought you into behavioral health in the first place?
Oh, geez. Well, I feel like I've been in this field for it feels like my whole life at this point. But I remember really distinctly a couple things happened when I was a teenager, actually. I remember we had a family friend whose daughter had been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and they had invited me to Jefferson City on a mental health advocacy day. And I just remember being in that space thinking, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. Like, it was just a weird thing. However, I did not follow my intuition nor my gut at that point, because I also thought, but I won't make any money, so I better go into business. So that's how I started college for one semester. And then I was like, well, that's clearly is not my niche. And so I switched over then to psychology, and then went on to get my master's in social work after that. So
very cool. Now, as being an advocate for trauma-informed care, how do you really define that?
So I think about trauma-informed care as being able to be present and mindful that any person you meet may have a trauma story, and that we, just as humans, need to be really mindful about how we interact with folks, because we could very unintentionally do more harm to somebody without even knowing it. Mm-hmm. So for me, that's what it means to live in a trauma-informed world, workplace, home, is that it's not just the people that I serve as far as clients, but it's also the people that I work with who have stories. The person who is a volunteer has a story, and just, I mean, I could list every single person I come in contact with. To me, it's our job to be mindful of that, so we don't do more harm.
That is so true. I could also share many stories of how you could be really disempowered by people's words whenever, they don't really understand the experiences that you've had.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, I knew that before Jake was killed. Like, I was already doing this work. I was already a leader in my organization. I was already the leader of implementing trauma-informed practices. But when I experienced that trauma and that loss, and the way people did not know how to take care of me, I was like, wow, this is a little shocking to me, and people in my own workspace. So yeah, definitely a lot of harm can be done unintentionally, I think.
Yeah. What do you see as some of the biggest barriers to trauma-informed care in leadership?
Well, to me, one of the biggest barriers that I've encountered is leaders feeling like that means that they can't set rules or boundaries or have expectations that, that I can come in and say, well, this is what happened to me, this is why I'm behaving this way or whatnot. And I think leaders are afraid of that. They're afraid that, well, frankly, I think also they're afraid they lose their power when they shift to that. But that's actually not a bad thing, right? I mean, there's already a power differential anyway in leadership versus your employee. You have to reconcile that at some point. And I think that leaders are afraid to do that. The other thing I really think is that, unfortunately, there's still so much stigma around just even the word trauma. Sometimes I'll be in meetings and people will say, Jamie, can you use a word besides trauma? Can you use the word stress? And I'm like, no, I cannot do that. So
Yeah, that's really strange. I would say too that leaders, more on what you just said about, afraid to lose their power, but I think that they don't really know how to start those conversations. Trauma can be really scary, and people's
Yeah.
emotions can be very worrisome. 50% of the population is what's called emotionally undefined, and they're feeling everybody else's emotions and they
Mhm.
can be very reactive. So sometimes what they do is they just push it down and they pretend that emotions don't exist, but that's
Right.
not very emotionally intelligent.
Right. We're going to walk into the workplace and everything's going to be fine. And we're going to, forget that whatever has happened in our home life. And also, let's be honest, is that our leaders have stories too. And
Mhm.
I think that there's some fear around if I start being more mindful of other people's stories, then I might have to be a little more mindful of how my story shows up in the workplace as well. And I think that that can be a scary thing as well.
Yeah, for sure. So losing your son, Jake, in such a tragic way, what has grief taught you about leadership?
Grief teaches you lessons you never really wanted to learn, but there they are, right? Yeah. So for me, one of the biggest things, I call them my gifts from Jake. I talk about like just this transformation really that I've had to go through as a result of experiencing what I've experienced. But what's happened is just watching that happen in my as a leader too. Um, so one, just I feel like I show up differently for people that I supervise, or just not even for people that I supervise, just as a leader, I show up differently for humans because I know that I don't know their stories and tragedy can happen. But also I found my voice in this process that I did not I didn't know it was lost. Does if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh, but because especially at first when I had to advocate so much for my family and for Jake in the legal system, I had to advocate, as you know, for Zane, who's my younger son, in the school systems. Like I had to be up front and center taking care of my family. And what happened is that kind of embodied me a little bit. And I feel like I am a better advocate for my employees, for the programs that I have, for the whatever it is that I'm doing. I feel like I'm less likely to be quiet. Ironically, I actually am. You know how I think the world has some synergy, but I was writing a blog and literally it was about the fact that in the last few months, I feel like something's happened and my voice has shifted and I've lost it a little bit.
Mm.
And I think that and in all places, in my workplace, in my home, in my community, and I think that is also the other thing that grief has taught me is that I can give myself grace to say that doesn't mean I'm doing something wrong. I'm a bad leader. It just means I need to, figure it out and fix that.
Yeah, and sometimes I think it's not necessarily fixing it, but giving yourself some grace and
Yes,
some time to heal. And I mean, I feel like loss is like a lifetime healing journey.
100%. Yes, 100%. Darn it.
Could you share with the listeners like Jake's story, like what happened?
Sure, sure. So I have two boys, Jake and Zane, and when Jake was 17, actually on June 25th of 2017, my husband and I had gone to a family graduation in St. Louis. We're located in the Kansas City area, and both of the boys, Jake was 17 at the time, Zane was 15, and both of the boys had made arrangements with me to stay at a friend's house, which I knew, which I, confirmed. But also Jake at 17 decided that he was going to sneak back to the house with a couple of his other friends. And he had actually gone to bed, and one of his other friends, the other boys had left except for one of the kids who had stayed down in my basement. And I think believe continued to use, I don't know, use drugs. I'm not going to say. I know he was on mushrooms. I know that was probably part of the reason a couple of the boys were like no, and Jake went to bed was like I'm not doing that. But he became more and more just I don't know dysregulated. Started tearing up my basement. Jake heard that, came downstairs, tried to stop him, and a fight ensued. And the young man ran out the door. Jake tried to stop him again because he was getting in his car. Jake didn't want him to drive. And he turned his car on Jake and he killed him.
And you mentioned that you had to advocate in the legal system. Did
Mhm.
he end up getting punished for what he did?
He did. He did. He's incarcerated right now. He was charged with voluntary manslaughter, and well, he was charged with murder. But again, the legal system. I've learned a lot about the legal system that there's a lot of pressure to do plea agreements and things like that. So anyway, that being said, but he did get charged, and then or he got he pled to that lesser, and then the judge gave him the maximum sentence for that. So, which is 15 years.
Wow. Whew.
Yeah. It's a lot.
A lot. And even knowing that story, I can remember us sitting down in that coffee shop and getting to know each other because
Yes.
we lived in that same neighborhood. So it was very public what had happened. And I remember feeling very drawn to you because, I had lost my
Mm.
husband,
Yes.
little less than 5 years beforehand. So I had
Right.
such a knowledge about loss, but the imagining losing a child has always been such a painful thing to even think about. So I
Absolutely.
really felt very drawn to you back then, and
Mm.
I love seeing what you're doing in the world, how you're taking this pain and you're turning it into purpose. So you've spoken about systems that don't know how to support trauma survivors. What do you
Mhm.
wish more leaders understood about being present for those in pain?
Ugh. I think one of the biggest things to me is I think you have better employees. I mean, just from a leadership standpoint, is if I actually give you space to grieve or to talk about what you're having, and I think also I do think this is one of the barriers and why leaders are afraid to do it because, and I've heard them say it, well, I'm not their therapist. I don't want them to bring their stuff into work like that. But the reality is their stuff is coming into work with them regardless. And so by acknowledging it, you are creating a connection. And for me, connection is one of the most important things for me as a leader. Like I want to have connection with the people that I work with. So yes, the people that I supervise, but just I want to show up as my authentic self. And I think that when we do that, when we allow for people to come in with their stories and we allow them to have a bad day and just acknowledge, hey, what's going on? Is there something outside of work? How can I support you? It doesn't mean I'm your therapist. It means how can I support you because I'm a human and I care about you. I think that that's one of the biggest things that I've learned in this journey is connection can change everything, and you're going to have better employees. You're going to have better employees just by showing up, and taking 5 minutes to listen to what's going on with them. So that's probably I would say if I had to think about like the biggest thing that I wish had been different and not be so afraid. I know I'm a lot. I know my grief shows up. I know it's messy, but also like I don't know any other way to be,
Mm,
and so
yeah,
and I think that that's true of all of us that are trauma survivors, right? Tammy is I know sometimes it's messy,
yeah,
but it doesn't make me a bad employee just because I've had bad things happen to me.
yes, yeah.
Yeah,
And I think that whenever you are open to listening, or maybe if it's not your gift, you know, finding them support, having that ability within your organization to bring in
absolutely.
somebody to help them move through that. I do a lot of like business coaching with people, but we don't just talk about that. Most of the people that come to me have some kind of trauma. And trauma it's not just losing your spouse or losing your
No,
child. It could be going through a divorce. I mean, it could be a car accident. It could be miscommunication with your parents, or, there is so many things
absolutely.
that are traumatic that we're going through right now. I mean, heck, as a society, COVID has been very traumatic for people. And they really need somebody that is willing to listen to what they're going through without judgment and help them to move through things, not forget it, not let it go completely, but release it enough that they can function in
Mhm.
a high capacity again. And I think that a lot of leaders don't, they they dismiss that need.
Agreed. I think so you use the word judgment. Like to me, that's the other probably thing that I think I've learned is because I've had that experience of feeling judged in my workplace because of what happened to me. And so, and I always tell folks if I'm talking or teaching about trauma and about being a trauma survivor and what that means, I always say, you may think that you're showing up for them authentically, but if you're holding a speck of judgment around how they're doing their job, around how they're showing up at work, trauma survivors know that. I mean, like I can feel it in my body when somebody is not honoring my story, whenever they're showing up in a spot of judgment versus kindness. And it flips the switch for me, right? Like I don't want to have a relationship with you. I'm not going to do my best work because I already know you've got some preconceived notions for me. And I think all of us who have experienced something know that. And so I know that I guess I'm more aware of that,
Mhm.
than what I was before because of what happened to me. Like I think just showing somebody who, I don't know, just an example, maybe they are struggling to get to work every day. And instead of just being like, this is a bad employee, it's understanding, well, maybe they're struggling to get to work every day because they're a single parent. They don't have any other supports. They have their own trauma story. And so childcare is an issue, like a genuine, scary thing for them. I don't know, just that showing up non-judgmentally is such a huge thing. And I agree, like we all have something. My COVID has left us all vulnerable to the impact of trauma for sure. If nothing else has, that has.
Yeah. And I think that, I mean, at least for myself, I had a lot of self-judgment. And so,
Mhm.
I don't need to feel judgment from somebody else. Like I
Yeah.
had enough of my own. And
Yeah.
yeah, I think that the kindness, I think, see, your kind people are my people behind you. And I think
Mhm.
kindness is the new commodity that is a teachable skill that we need to focus more on. Not
Isn't that crazy that you have to teach kindness?
yes, yes,
Yeah.
it really is.
Yeah.
You would think that that started in like kindergarten, but unfortunately, my kids had some trauma in the school with, bullying and other
Yes.
kids and teachers. Like the school system, you talked about advocating in the school system. For Zane, like I had to do that for both Dakota and Hunter. And I just think that our school system is not set up to support children no matter what they are going through in life. Like if they've had trauma or if they're neurodivergent, like the
Mhm.
system is just so broken. But that is a completely different story.
It is. I know we can have a whole nother podcast about that
You
because
really good.
yes, agreed.
So,
Agreed.
how do you balance being vulnerable with your own story while also being a source of strength and inspiration for others?
Yeah, so I do it in a couple ways. One is people don't know every part of my story. I share very freely about it. I'm very vulnerable. I'm very vulnerable in my workplace, in doing the work that I'm doing now. And also parts of my story are my story. And so for me, that's a really important piece of how I protect myself in being vulnerable is I have my people that I that I trust, like I talk about transparency and vulnerability and collaboration. And also like my circle is like this of the people who know all the things.
Mhm.
And I will always protect that because otherwise I don't think that I could kind of put things in a box when I need to show up as a leader, to show up as a if there's too much of my story out there, if that makes sense. And like a lot of my story is out there. Like it's one, I couldn't control the narrative when it happened. And so it was already out there. But then also part of me being vulnerable and sharing that is how I stay well is by showing people like it's okay to have really hard days. It's okay to be 8 years down the line and wake up crying and not knowing how you're going to get to work that day, how you're going to do your job. So for me, that vulnerability is a part of how I think I show up compassionately for other people as well, if that makes sense.
So what role do you think that kindness in leadership, especially in environments where people are carrying invisible trauma, like how do they do that?
So I think it's huge. One of the things I that I really remind, especially leaders, if you can, sometimes you have to back it with a little science to really get, like, it is science that kindness actually helps people to do better and to be well. It releases the right chemicals in our brain. It's if I'm kind to you, it releases the right chemicals in your brain. It's like win-win for both sides of the story. And I think, being kind doesn't mean that we don't have boundaries. And that's the part that I want leaders to understand is that being kind doesn't mean that I don't still confront issues that come up in job performance or whatever it is. But if I can think about how I would want somebody to talk to me, right? How I don't want you to not bring problems to me, but I want you to bring it to me in a way that's respectful, that shows that you care about me. So that's the bigger picture. But even on the smaller scale of just be freaking nice to people, I mean, just say hello to your employees when they walk in the door. Make eye contact. That is actually kindness, right? Is just acknowledging another person and saying, hey, I hope you're having a good day, or I like the shirt you're wearing today, or just simple things that we as leaders can do that let our people know we notice them
Mm,
goes a long way into building that relationship and that connection, which I think is, again, so vital. Is if somebody connects with me as a human, they're more likely to be receptive whenever I need to talk to them about something that's not so great.
mm-hmm. Yeah, having regular, one-to-ones with
Mhm.
each, like not just addressing everybody in a group, but getting there and caring about, what they're saying. I had a conversation with somebody that talked about their Oreo method, and it's like positive, then challenging situation, and then ending with positive. And emotional intelligence says that you need like 5 good positive feedbacks to combat one negative thing that you want people to work on. And so if we can just start to talk to people about, hey, this is what I see is really going well for you. What do you feel like could be better? And people will, like, they know what's going on. They just need somebody to believe in them enough to help them get to the other side of it.
The other thing, yes, I agree with that. And as you were talking, it actually made me think about a situation. The other thing I think, when I think about like being a trauma-informed leader and what that means, I remember one time I had a team, and I had two of my managers who, they were amazing. I loved them dearly, and they did a great job. And oftentimes, if in my role would get busy, their supervision would get pushed to the side.
Mm,
And it wasn't because I didn't think they didn't need supervision. It's because I trusted them, right? I had implicit trust in them to be able to do their job. And I remember one of them came up and said, "Hey, Jamie, I need to talk to you." And I was like, "Yeah, sure. What's up?" And she said, "So I know you trust me, but I need you." And I was like, "Say more, say more what you mean." She's like, "When you cancel supervision on me, I feel like I am missing something that I need. Like I need that support from you. I miss that, like I feel like I am learning to be a better supervisor because I have that time with you, whether or not I have a crisis or not. It's important that we have that scheduled time." And I was like, that's absolutely 100% true. And so I had to really mindfully shift the way that I thought about things, that
mm,
if I needed to cancel a supervision, I rescheduled it for that week. I found another time frame where I could meet with them. And that one situation taught me so many things about being a supervisor. Like I was grateful that she trusted me enough to use her words, to come and tell me like, I need to have time with you. But also it was a reminder that our role as leaders is not just to supervise the hard people. It is to supervise our people that show up and make sure that they know that we're there for them and whatnot. So
yes, I can remember when I left an organization, I was upset because I didn't have a relationship with the leader because, I'm self-contained. I didn't really need supervision. I was doing my job. I didn't have problems, but I also, when I got upset about something, I didn't come to them because they hadn't built a relationship with me. And that's what
Right.
one-to-ones have with your employees. Like, you're building a relationship, and even if they don't need special support or, to be uplifted by, hey, you're not doing your job right here. Let me have these supervised calls with you. People need connection to feel like they're
Yeah.
part of something regardless. And maybe that's a 10-minute call once a month, or maybe it's, an hour call that can end early. Whatever it is, I think that that is really a place that a lot of leaders fall short.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's so easy to be like, oh, they've been with the organization for 5 years. They know what they're doing. They don't need that contact. But it really is the contact that they need. And also, how do we grow and learn is by having whatever that supervision is and whatever that means, and for me, it's always like in my mind is if I'm doing my job well, then at some point you may not want to be at this job because you're ready to move forward and move on. Maybe this is your dream job and so you don't want that, but also I've given you the skills to move to what fills you, where you're supposed to be.
Yeah. So, what helps you keep Jake's legacy alive with your work and advocacy that you do today?
Oh, um, so a lot of things really, but I do have the opportunity to speak about our story and do presentations where I, talk about kind of my journey, my healing journey, what that looks like, how and Jake's always a part of that story. And it always starts with his story. It always starts with just, he's my son. He's always going to be my son, and he's in the room with us now because we spoke his name, and you
Yeah.
know this is what you get when you get me, is you also get the fact that I'm a mom of two, and both of my boys are just as important to me now as they ever were. So that's one way, is definitely doing presentations and speaking about that. And even in my work now, with the Battle Within, which, so I have my LLC that I do these presentations in, and coaching, but then also with the Battle Within, I'm the clinical director. I have the opportunity to do a lot of presentations. We serve veterans and first responders, so I have a lot of chances to talk about trauma, secondary trauma, what that looks like. And I always say I can't talk about this without my story coming with me, because it impacts that. So I have that chance, but even just the clients that we serve, again, I am very mindful of how much of my story I share, and when I share it with that population, it helps me to be a better advocate for them because I understand differently the impact of trauma on a person's life. So that's one way. I do write a blog that really is, for me, sometimes it's geared towards leaders, sometimes it's geared towards trauma survivors, sometimes it's geared towards loved ones who support trauma survivors. I just want to normalize this process of traumatic loss, of trauma, of grief, that our community, our society, there's this thing about like you've got to be over it, right? 8 years, and you're still talking about your son? Yes, as a matter of fact. And also in 30 years, I'm still going to be talking about my son. So I just want to normalize that for people. And so I feel like it's because of the work I do that I have a unique opportunity to say his name, to honor his legacy. An interesting thing happened though in my healing process, I'll say. I thought when I started doing this consulting work, talking about trauma, teaching about it, that was the goal, was I just wanted to honor Jake. However I can honor Jake, however I can honor my family, Zane, my husband, like our journey, this is what I'm going to do. But what happened, I think as I got healthier, is I realized like, oh, also I want to have a legacy of helping people. I want to have a legacy of teaching about kindness, of teaching about using our voice to advocate for ourselves, and so So I think that that's been kind of a nice shift for me, is that I'm still honoring Jake, but also, by the way, like I want to make a difference in people's lives, and I want that to be my legacy.
Ah, I love that. So I love normalizing the conversation because it is so taboo to talk about your loss, especially, this is almost year 13 for us. And,
Yeah.
being a single mom and raising your kids for 13 years without
Right.
your father, it has not been an easy feat.
Mm-mm.
But you also touched on the secondary losses that happen. And I think that that is something that really very few people talk about. They realize, going from, for me, going from, a two-parent household to a one-parent household overnight with Dakota was 10 and Hunter was 4. And then now Dakota's almost 23, Hunter is 17. And there has been a lot of changes, a lot of additional losses that have happened, and it really compounds the grief.
Absolutely.
And watching your child grieve over losing their brother, losing their parent is so heartbreaking.
There's probably nothing worse, is there, than watching your child in pain? Yeah, I
Yes.
agree with that. I agree with that. And I think that those secondary losses that no one does talk about, it's so huge. Even the fact that I'm not at the place where I worked whenever I lost Jake, that's a result of what happened to me. Like, I mean, there's the story behind that, and it was my choice to leave that place, but also I had a lot of people in that place. I had longevity there.
Mhm.
So there was certainly like losses around my workplace that I didn't anticipate feeling, loss around just the way I parent, right? Just the way, I mean, Tammy, that you're
Here, you parent
certainly,
here for a while.
huh, for sure, for sure. I still parent with fear. Poor Zane, he's 23, and I'm like, I'm trying to not mom you right now, but
Mhm.
I don't know how to not do that yet. So I'm working on it, but I always forget that Dakota and Zane are the same age. So
Mhm.
yeah, that's crazy. But
Yeah, and I remember, and for you, I remember you guys moved right away. You didn't want to
yes,
be in that home. So, like,
yeah,
uprooting and changing, so much change all at once.
so much change.
Yeah.
So much change. Sometimes I feel like I'm just now kind of getting my footing around that secondary loss, like really understanding the impact of it, like literally I've lost friends behind it. And some of that I've lost them because I found my voice, right? But it doesn't mean I'm not sad about it and I don't grieve about it, because those are unexpected griefs, right? Unexpected tears, I will say.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. Like, you think about people that go through a divorce and they lose a lot of people, but I was so surprised at how many friendships I lost after David died because, you know, for whatever reasons, I don't really know for sure, they just did, but it was very uncomfortable that I was a very big voice for grief for a long
Mhm.
time. I've been a little more quiet these last several years as I've been going through other challenging life things,
Right,
but
right.
not, and I haven't talked as openly about, things that my kids have gone through because
Mhm.
that's their story. I can't really,
Yes.
I'm not going to publicly talk about their things, other than, the school system, I think, again, is one of the biggest challenges that
For
we
sure.
experienced with that.
Yeah, for sure. I was just gonna say, I think whenever you think like that whole journey and how, I mean, part of your what that was one of the things that really attracted me to wanting to like know you and have a conversation with you, because you were healing out loud. You were saying like I am struggling, but I also learned. So I did lose some people, but man, some of the people that I gained in my life, holy cow, I would have never thought some of the friendships that I have now would have existed. Even somebody like you, who we're not best friends, we're not, but I know that you're somebody that I trust, right? And so if I really needed something, I would reach out to you and I wouldn't even blink an eye about that. So I think that there's some there's some gifts in that wound, right? That you don't anticipate that happen over, you know.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
almost those secondary benefits,
Yeah.
right? Helping others through sharing your story.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, if you could leave listeners with a message on how to better support their teams, what would that be?
Uh, Man, give grace.
Mhm.
Give grace, really. Do a better job at giving grace to your folks when they're struggling, instead of jumping to the worst possible option. Take a breath, and to stop and pause and think, how would I want somebody to show up for me,
Mm-hmm.
and show up for them that way? Because I don't think we do that as leaders all the time. I mean, we're so trained to show up in a way that is not authentic, usually not kind, and usually use the policy book to show up this way for this problem, right? So yeah, if I could leave leaders with a message, it would be to, when to take a breath and really show up as your authentic self. I promise you the payoff will be way better than showing up the way that not feels comfortable, but the way that we've been taught to show up as leaders, right? You will have longevity with your employees if they know that you care about them sincerely. They will work harder because their stress levels will be less if they know that there's connection and somebody cares about them. I mean, the benefits for you as a leader are crazy. Just be nice, be kind.
Yeah, yes. So, what does unleash your amazing leadership mean to you?
So for me, unleash your amazing leadership for me really means that I am a leader in all situations.
Mhm.
So it's not just supervising people. I am a leader in my community. I'm a leader in my in how I show up for the clients that I serve, but also the staff that are under me, but also the other leaders in my organization. Like I want to be an example. And so Unleash Your Amazing means I'm an example of what good, healthy, trauma-informed leadership is. Trauma-informed leadership is my kind of my guidebook.
Mm.
And that's what I always want to unleash, if you will. I want to unleash trauma-informed leadership.
Yeah, I think that's an important mission to have. I think that there's a lot of leaders that have a lot of opportunity for growth out there.
Mhm.
And I think that each person is a leader in their own way. Even as kids, we should, I'd always have told my kids, you are a leader, not a follower.
Mhm.
And I think that that's a good mission. And something else that you said about treating people, essentially, I talk a lot about treat people how they want to be treated, not how you want to be treated. But I think that that comes from putting yourself in their shoes to
Mhm.
understand the experiences that they've had and not from a place of dismissing. You still have to get the job done inside your organization,
Yes, absolutely.
but it doesn't mean that you can't you can't be compassionate while you are holding the boundaries and finding them that support that they need in those really challenging times.
Agreed. Agreed. Yes, absolutely. I think, I teach about empathy and I talk about empathy, and I feel like we've lost that. A lot of us have lost that ability to put ourselves in another person's shoes, but it's really not that. To me, it's more like, can you just, again, just take a breath and think, man, I don't know their story, but it feels it, and I don't need to know their story.
Mm.
That's the other piece of it, is I don't need to know their story to treat them the right way,
With kindness.
with kindness,
Yeah, holding
with
the
compassion, with, yes, exactly, holding space for them, just showing up. So, yeah.
some. Well, thank you so much for sharing your time with me today and our listeners. How would people get a hold of you if they wanted to have you come in and speak inside their organization?
So it could be one of two ways. One is through my LLC. And so they can go onto my site, which is inspirehopehealing.com, and there's just a request form on there. They could request a conversation with me. And so we could do it that way. Also, through the Battle Within, where I'm the clinical director. We serve veterans and first responders. I go out to a lot of organizations that are, you know, law enforcement, EMS, hospital, frontline medical staff, veterans organizations, and chat with them as well. And so you could just reach out through thebattlewithin.org for that connection as well.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much again for sharing your time. I always love our conversations.
Me too. I know I feel like we could talk for hours, so I'm glad to see you.
Yeah, it's nice too.
All right. Take good care.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks for listening to Unleash Your Amazing Leadership. If this episode resonated, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss what's next. Want more support or curious about working together? Visit unleashyouramazing.com to explore coaching, workshops, and ways to connect. Until next time, keep showing up and unleashing your amazing.